Who was the first person to download something from a cloud to 2 tablets?
I don't know who.
Moses.
I love your dad jokes. They are my favorite.
It's going to be a regular thing.
I think it needs to be a staple for Listen, Learn, Champion.
I'm here for it. Welcome to another episode. We're so glad you're here to hang out with us again.
Yes, welcome back. We are so excited to have you.
Yeah, last week was baptisms, and we had 26 people make a public declaration.
It was incredible.
It was awesome.
I could not believe the families being baptized.
I know.
Baptisms were my favorite.
It was. I wanted to try and count all the kids. I don't even remember. But it was just awesome to see children and families and people rededicating and doing another public declaration. It was just awesome.
It was so good. Oh my gosh. There was the cutest, sweetest thing I saw. A mom was getting baptized and her children were in elementary school. So Chrissy and Chris let the kids make.
Oh, is that what the signs were for?
Yes, they were saying congrats.
It was so cute.
And when she was baptized and she was brought back up, the little boy was like, "Go, mommy." It was probably my favorite part of baptism.
I didn't even hear that. I told myself that I was going to be really loud at baptism, so that was my accomplishment for Sunday, was being obnoxiously loud. I don't know if I did well, but
no, baptisms was great.
It was awesome.
Trevor sent me the pictures today of all the baptisms, and there is a photo of my daughter drinking the baptism water from the little spigot as Trevor was letting go of the water. I'm like, where were all of the adults? Who did not stop this?
I remember when Maddie came running up to you and you gave her a hug and you were like, "Why are you wet?" And I wanted to be like, "Felicia, we just baptized 26 people. There's water everywhere." Like, what do you mean?
She was drinking the water.
Oh, I love it. She's drinking the holy water of multiple bodies.
Yeah, please, Jesus.
Well, this week we talked about the 10 steps. Was that the official title?
I think it was called Common Steps.
Okay. He talked about a scale of 1 to 10. It was pretty good. I loved it.
Yes. So this is just something we talk about in our household all the time. Like, what is our next step?
Yeah.
And one thing I really loved that he talked about was we can't just take leaps. It has to be steps.
Yeah, definitely. I think that people forget that it's not a marathon. It's just life and you have another day. So just take another step. Do one thing better today than you did yesterday, kind of thing, if that makes sense.
Oh, yeah. I mean, think about it. I hate processes. I hate the waiting, but it's necessary. We have to do that in order to grow.
Yeah. Definitely. Something that I felt challenged by is I feel like we live in a generation of instant gratification where people watch online and they create an image of their head of, oh, I need to be just like him. And so they start making these bounds in life. Do you think that social media will cause a part in the next generation of feeling like they can't just take steps, that they have to bound into the next part of life?
I think that if that does become an issue, how do I want to say this? I think that us as the older generation and for our children and things like that, of teaching them that it is about steps. So as much as there is the instant gratification, I think them seeing us live that out and walk it out, I think will help that. But yeah, I do see that being something that could happen.
Yeah, I think too is that we can also encourage future people is that you talk it out as well. Hey, we are going to take a step towards this direction, and it may look like we're taking leaps and bounds because a lot is happening at once, but we are taking steps, but it may look like bounds to a little kid, if that makes sense.
No, definitely. And I think I heard this once, it actually came from Pastor Chris Hodges. He had students say to him, because, he's a pastor in a church in Alabama, and he's really big part of the Ark and just this huge organization.
Have you been?
I have not. I want to go so bad. But anyhow, he had a student come up to him and say, "Man, I would love to be where you're at now and doing what you do." He goes, "You might love it now, but would you have loved it 25 years ago?" And it was just so good because it's so true. Where he's at today was not where he started. He had to take those steps to be able to empower the people he empowers to help the people that he helps.
That's really good. I loved also the examples that he used, which we'll get down the road with. It just definitely helped putting that into perspective. But going from that, how have you asked God to show you your next step? Because I feel like that looks different for everyone.
Yeah. I'm a very practical person. Like I need to know what I'm supposed to do. I'm an organized, like I want it on my to-do list. And I think for me, when I asked God, it almost comes like an idea, but I'm like, I'm not that smart to think of that idea. And so to me, that's whenever I know it's the difference between me and God speaking, because it's greater than anything I could have thought myself.
That's a good point. I think for me, I always have way too many ideas. And then it's like when I start talking about it with someone, they're like, oh, well, that one sounds really good. That one doesn't sound very practical. And I'm like, oh, yeah, you're right. So also, I loved that Trevor called you out for your chandelier. She picked this wallpaper and we based everything around this wallpaper, and I love this wallpaper. It was the best thing we ever did. So
listen, it's called Vision, and Trevor does not have that.
Well, we have vision, obviously, with this space. So, and it was all because of the background.
I know. My house is decorated because of my chandelier.
I'm here for it.
And he's welcome.
The next thing we were going to talk about was the Moses steps and how it applies to our life. The very first thing that we should start off with is it's okay if you're a 0.
Oh yeah. Like don't let shame like come on you because you're a 0, because you're a 1, because you're a 2, because that doesn't matter. It's where are you going next? Are you taking those steps to go from a 0 to 1? Are you taking those steps to go from a 7 to an 8? And you know, when Trevor was talking about the scale, I started thinking about new Christians versus older Christians. And I started talking about babies and adults. As a baby, they don't know how to crawl. They don't know how to walk. How does it all start though? With tummy time. And they can only do 20 minutes a day. That's all like their bodies can handle. And so I started thinking about that with your walk with Christ. If you are a 0 to 1, what is that tummy time you can do? Meaning, is it just getting in your Bible, reading it every day? Is it doing a devotional? Is it joining a small group?
When we were in church, he talked about different examples, and he talked about their first steps. And he said Abraham, who was the father of faith, the first thing he had to do was get up. Then he talked about Moses and how he had to just turn to look at the bush. He talked about David and Goliath. All he had to do was take a meal to his brother. And the list goes on. But I love the story of Moses so much. I used to did not like the Old Testament because it was really hard for me to read. But over time, it started to make more sense. And that just comes with taking a step and actually reading it and taking my time and not avoiding it. But I read it today before we came in, and I just felt like there was very practical steps that Moses took that we can apply to our life. And so the first step was Moses had a past, meaning he did kill an Egyptian and he ran away. That's in Exodus 2:11. He did run away. Moses ran away. Pharaoh was very angry, tried to kill him. And how many times have you ran away? How many times have any of us tried to just run away and we almost took steps backwards rather than forward? And I feel like that is a very practical step 0. All of us have a past. All of us have ran away. All of us are kind of in limbo, like what happens now? And then it goes, I'm going to take to next, is step number 2. Moses decides to look at the bush. It was on fire, but it wasn't burning. And I think, to me, I just had this instant, like, curiosity. You have curiosity of going to a church. A friend might have invited you, and you're like, I'm just going to go. I'm going to feel it out. Moses didn't have to look at that bush, but he was curious. And so he went. I think that's a very practical thing that we do. Not only that, Moses was working when he stopped. And I feel like people now, there's so much going on that even if you're at work, you can still be very easily distracted, and you can stop and your curiosity will get the best of you because someone texted you or something like that. So then number 3, Moses took his sandals off because it was holy ground. And I feel like that shows respect and knowledge that God is who he says he is. And that's just you acknowledging, oh, okay, I've gone to church. You've gone to church a couple of times. Now you've taken that next step of, oh, God is who he says he is. Still not sure, but okay, I'll respect who he is. Step 4 is he was chosen to be the one to save the Israelites. And I took that as God can show you your worth and how he wants to use you in his kingdom, which also can lead to doubting yourself, because Moses doubted himself multiple times. He said he is not worthy. He can't do it. I don't have the power to do that, all that stuff. And we do that.
Oh, yeah.
We do that a lot. And we just can totally doubt who we are and how we can be used by God. And I think that's another practical step, is just saying, hey, God, like, I'm not really sure how you can do that. And I'm not really sure if I want to do that. Because Moses made excuses that I'm not equipped to do those things. And so
I think that's a tactic of the enemy that
absolutely.
we've talked about, a couple times, is he reminds you of your past.
Yes,
and
absolutely.
God's already brought us from that. That was our first step. So we've got to remember the things that God has brought us up from, and remember, God brought us from that. He can call me to do this.
Yeah. And I think if you make the practical steps, which is kind of step 5 that I'll talk about, is God's going to make sure you're equipped, and he's going to make you feel confident in who he's called you to be, because you've already taken step 1.
That is so good. Yes.
Yeah. So for step 5, it says when you accept Christ, he equips you. And so if you're not familiar with Exodus or the story of Moses, he's given a staff, and the staff turns to a snake. And for me, it was like, oh, that's the Bible. Like, the Bible just looks like a book, but it's full of stories and power and all the things that you can use with it, and just totally just be on the attack mode if you are in your word. And then,
okay,
sorry.
Could you imagine you're holding a staff?
No.
And all of a sudden it turns to a snake?
Absolutely not.
Like, God, can we do something else besides the snake?
I would be like, yeah, I'll do it. And they're like, I'm not going to pick that up.
You want to turn that back to staff just down there?
Yeah, I'll pick it up afterwards because I don't want to touch that. Literally, I hate
I'm
snakes.
terrified.
Yeah. The second one is, I'm just going to read the verse. He says in Exodus 4, Moses said to the Lord, 4:10, Moses said to the Lord, "Pardon your servant, Lord. I have never been eloquent, neither in the past nor since you have spoken to your servant. I am slow of speech and tongue." And he further on kind of gives him a friend. It says, hey, I'm going to talk for you. Your friend is going to talk for you and all the things. And when I heard that, like when I read that, just instantly thought of small groups.
Oh, yeah.
When you're plugged into a small group, they're going to be pouring into you, loving you. You might say something and they might guide you in a different direction of like, yeah, you said that and that was really good, but what if you think of it like this? And you start to build a different way of thinking and a different way of speaking and a different way of loving. And I just feel like that is when you start to really work in what God has called you, is when you are involved and you're creating those relationships vertically and horizontally.
Oh, yeah. It's great because with small groups, like you're talking to people who have the same desire as you, and that's to please God. And so when you're asking for advice, you're knowing you're getting advice from someone who has already sought God on something maybe for their own lives, that they're able to give wisdom into that.
Definitely.
Into your life.
Definitely. And we've said this before, there's so much power in your story. And I think this goes along with what Trevor was saying with with things, as long as things don't own you, they can be very powerful. And I think the same thing with your story. If your story and your past don't own you, they're a very powerful tool to lead people to Christ or in a different direction.
That is really good. Your story can help so many people because it helps people realize, like, hey, you're not alone.
Yeah.
And I think when people see that and see where God has brought you, they're like, okay, if he did it for you, he can definitely do it for me.
Yeah. And there's no greater or worse story. Like, everyone's story and situation is different, but you're still going to get through it.
Absolutely. And something that maybe seems minimal to you, you're like, this doesn't mean a lot. It was only this. No, that's like, that hurt you. So if that hurt you, then that is what God's trying to use.
Yeah. And then step 6 is Moses leaned on God to use him and made him king of his life. And I think that's with like the Red Sea. He called on God, split the Red Sea, used the staff. Furthermore, he went to God, he made the 10 commandments, and it's just constantly leaning on God, no matter how hard it is. Like, really encourage you to read the story of Moses, because they went through some stuff, like, and it wasn't easy, but Moses continued to lean on God.
Yeah, that's really good. And they were able to look back at, I mean, God parted the Red Sea for them.
Yeah.
And then closed it back up. Like, if that's not something to help you get through the next season, as Moses, I don't know what is.
Yeah, literally. Moses is just a great testament of taking steps.
Yeah, exactly. And that's all our relationship with God is just taking a small baby step at a time.
Yeah. And I loved, Trevor started the sermon with, we all desire to live a harmonious and high quality life. And that happens over time. You don't just get rich quick. You know, whatever that life looks like to you, you have to take those steps towards it. And that mirrors your spiritual life as well, which he also mentioned in the sermon. But
yeah, no, I love that. I honestly cannot say that first word.
What?
Harmonious. I was trying so hard to say it earlier, and I just skipped right over. I'm like, I'm just going to leave that.
That's how I feel about another word, but I'm not even going to try and say it on the podcast, because he's going to put it on the TV in the sanctuary, and then I'm going to be mortified.
It'll be on the bloopers.
Yeah. But do you have anything else you want to add to this week?
You know, just talking about steps and taking small steps, I thought about a crock pot.
I love it. I love food.
Oh, me too. And a crock pot is the easiest thing, because I can start it in the morning whenever I have all this energy. And then at night, I'm like dead.
Scoop it out.
I could just, it's all done. But it doesn't happen with a crock pot. It takes 4 to 8 hours, depending on like the what setting you put it on, or what you're cooking in there, potatoes, carrots, like whatever it could be. And I started thinking about, like, it doesn't happen right away. Like, it takes time. And that's just, I like to cook. So as Trevor was preaching on this, I was like, crock pot.
And don't forget, like, you can't earn your way anywhere. And you just have to have a relationship. God just wants the desires of your heart. He wants that relationship with you, and you're never going to be able to buy your way to heaven. And it just takes a step. But we have a good Bible verse.
Yeah, Ephesians 2:8. God saved you by his grace when you believed. And you can't take credit for this. It is a gift from God.
Yeah. I loved last week because I was challenged personally about how not making things common. And I feel like sometimes we make God giving his only son very common. Like, oh, yeah, this is the story we talk about every Easter, and it's very common. And I was very challenged, like, no, like, he was brutally hurt for our sins. And that's not common.
Yeah.
And I even forget that, and I even try to make it common. And I'm like, that's not common, and it is a gift.
Yeah.
I don't have to earn his love ever.
You can't earn it.
And it's a great feeling to not have to earn it.
It's so good, but knowing that you can't earn that makes you want to give everything to him. And I think that that's where those steps come in, is just wanting that relationship and saying thank you to him and just letting him just be king of your life. Like, whatever you want to do, God, like, you did this for me. I will do anything for you.
Yeah. Something that I just kind of thought of right now is for you to chew on. What is this next step that you feel as though God is calling you to do? And do you know how to pursue it? If you don't, we want to help you make practical steps to pursue what you feel like God is calling you to do. So we'll have to we've been meaning to figure out how to put something on the website and in person for people to write questions. But next week, if you come into church and you just feel like, I know what my next step is, I'm not sure how to practically walk that out, I encourage you to put that on the prayer sheet, and we're going to pray over that together as a team and just really praying for that. And if you include your email, we'll reach out to you, just because we're here to help you champion that season. And I feel like we oftentimes don't talk about what our next step is. We just talk about the goal. And I want to make it common to talk about the next step.
Oh, absolutely. The heart behind Champion is to make it so practical that you know exactly what your next step is. Yeah. And so if you need to talk to us or see us, like, just come pull us aside at church. Like, we would be happy to help you. Yeah.
I think that's all we kind of have for this week. We are so excited that you again chose to listen to us.
Yes, and we will see you next week for Listen, Learn, Champion.
Bye.